we do have breaking news. According to Adrian Wojnarowski of ESPN, Dan Hurley has turned down the Los Angeles Lakers' 6-year, $70 million offer. Didn't we think that number was higher?
Yeah.
And will return to chase a third straight national title, according to sources telling, it says ESPN, but that's really Adrian Wojnarowski. LA would have made him one of the NBA's six highest paid coaches. I don't know who are the highest paid coaches. I don't know. I assume Doc Rivers, maybe Eric Spoelstra, Greg Popovich would be on that list. Well, let's be honest. It is a fact that UConn is going for a third straight title. Fact. Since they have won the last two. But the way that's phrased, I just don't see that being the motivation for returning. You're not weighing, man, I really want to go win a third straight title. I mean, you want to do that. But that's not the motivation for turning down the Lakers job. Again, maybe I'm looking at it too harshly. I just don't think that's your motivation. It's an added benefit for real going back to UConn. But I think when you look at it, and I remember we go back to last week when we started talking about Dan Hurley and the potential for taking this job. And there were three things. There were a lot of offshoot conversations. But there were three things about it that jumped out to me. One, how would Dan Hurley coach professional basketball players? What Gino Auriemma said last week, we played the clip of him on with Dan Patrick, that he runs his college program like a high school program. That's very different from how you would run an NBA locker room. Very different. So there's an element of that. How would he be able to coach NBA players? And that's not about the X's and O's of coaching. That's about relationship-wise. How would you be able to do that? Could you have a more relaxed, not coach versus player relationship? Because most do you think Joe Mazzulla for Boston, do you think Mazzulla has a traditional, I'm the coach relationship? I don't believe so. It's not like it's a collaboration. Somebody's in charge, but it's much more of a, if there was a scale, I think the players are probably a little higher on the scale, and you as the coach need to manage how you control that and how you coach them. So there is an element of that with Dan Hurley that, to me, is an unknown. The biggest unknown is, how do you, as Dan Hurley, how would you, and he doesn't have to think about this now, how would you deal with 82 games, travel, 4 games in 5 nights, 5 games in a week? You don't have to deal with that at all in the college game. The only time that would ever be a factor is conference basketball tournament time. And at that point, you're not traveling at all. You're in the same spot for 5 days. And it's 5 and 5, which, again, those are just the games. The games are not really the problem. It's the travel. It's the fact that, and again, in the NBA, it's just a completely different beast. That, to me, is the number one factor. And the other one was the X's and O's part. But there isn't anybody who knows Danny Hurley who thinks that he can't handle that. That he is an elite basketball mind when it comes to the strategy and the game planning portion of being a coach. but it was that middle one that was really going to test him. And if you've got everything you want out of coaching in terms of your level of compensation, which I'm sure UConn is going to, we'll just say, sweeten. If you've got a great environment for your family, and he's an East Coast guy, and even though he's a Jersey City guy and his wife is also a Jersey person, Storrs, Connecticut isn't that far from your life. Yeah, it's Connecticut. It's a little bit different, but it's still close enough for the Hurleys to deal with. So if you have the chance to win and leave a mark, and you've got the compensation level is to what you want, and the location is ideal, you would be making a move for two reasons that don't strike me as Dan Hurley. One is money, and the other is ego. And I don't find that that's Dan Hurley in either one of those situations. So while it was tempting because it is the best job, it's the number one job in basketball. He also turned down Kentucky, by the way, which you could argue is the top college job. I would argue that North Carolina is the top college job. But either way, I mean, it's an argument to be made. He's got a great one. He's got one of the best college jobs. Certainly one of the 5 best. So don't make these moves for money. Don't make them based out of ego. And that's why Danny Hurley, I guess, has decided to stay at Connecticut. That's good for Connecticut. Whether it's good for college basketball or not, I agree with Gary Parrish, and these things are net zeros. It wouldn't be bad for college basketball, so it isn't necessarily great for college basketball. It's great for UConn. They don't have to find a coach that probably would not be as good as Dan Hurley. End of discussion there. But when we talked about it last week, there wasn't a single second where I was worried for the state of college basketball. We have plenty of other reasons to be worried about the state of college athletics than Dan Hurley going to coach the Lakers.